What if miracles aren't just divine mysteries, but scientific wonders we don't yet understand? Throughout history, stories of the blind being healed have inspired awe and faith. But could modern science begin to shed light on these sacred events? Without denying the divine power of God, this exploration dares to ask, can science and faith walk hand in hand? Perhaps the laws of nature are not separate from God, but a reflection of Him. In this journey, we will uncover how the healing of the blind, one of the Bible's most striking miracles, may find echoes in scientific discoveries, without ever diminishing the supernatural power behind them. The question remains, are miracles beyond science, or is science itself a miracle in disguise? Let the mystery unfold. In the beginning, the world was without form, and darkness covered the face of the deep. Then God said, "Let there be light," and light burst forth into existence. For centuries, this moment was viewed purely through the lens of faith. But as science advanced, something remarkable happened. Cosmologists began to speak of a Big Bang, a singular explosion of light and energy from which all matter, time, and space emerged. The poetic beauty of Genesis found a strange resonance in the language of physics. Was this merely coincidence, or was it a reflection of something deeper, something divine? Many believe science and religion are at odds, but what if science is not the enemy of faith, but its interpreter? What if the natural laws we observe are the signature of a divine intelligence that set them in motion? As we peer deeper into the universe with telescopes and microscopes, we find intricate order, balance, and intelligence in everything, from the gravitational pull of galaxies to the double helix of DNA. Could these laws be the very architecture of God's will? From the law of gravity to the speed of light, from atomic structures to biological systems, every element of the natural world points to a system far too precise to be accidental. Scientists have identified that if certain physical constants were altered by even the smallest fraction, life as we know it would be impossible. This fine-tuning has led many thinkers, both religious and secular, to ponder whether the universe is not just mathematically consistent but deliberately crafted. For people of faith, the answer is clear: this is not random, it is revelation. Scripture affirms this understanding. Psalm 104 speaks of God as one who stretches out the heavens like a tent, while Job reflects on the laws of the heavens, and asks, can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Job 38 verse 33. These ancient texts seem to acknowledge what science is only beginning to articulate: the universe operates on a framework of laws that not only sustain life but reflect intentionality. God's sovereignty is not separate from the laws of physics, it permeates them. When Jesus healed the blind, he was not introducing chaos into a system of order, he was restoring a broken part of that order. The eye, one of the most complex organs in the human body, is a marvel of biological design. It gathers light, converts it into electrical signals, and transmits them to the brain, which then interprets them into visual images. No camera, no AI system has ever come close to replicating its efficiency. And yet, in a moment, Jesus restored sight. Was this a violation of natural law, or the Master using his own design? God does not need to break the rules of nature to work a miracle, he wrote the rules. He can override them, yes, but more often, he works through them. Just as a composer can improvise on a melody they wrote, God can act through the laws he created. The miracle is not less powerful because it aligns with science, it is more profound because it reveals God's mastery over creation, both seen and unseen. It is tempting to separate the realms of science and spirituality, to say one belongs to the laboratory and the other to the sanctuary. But in truth, they are intertwined. Science is not the language of atheism, it is the language of exploration. And every exploration, if followed with humility, leads to wonder. That wonder, in turn, often leads to worship. Albert Einstein once said, "The most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible." In other words, it is astonishing that the universe is governed by laws that our minds can grasp. But perhaps this is no accident. Perhaps our ability to comprehend is part of the divine gift, an invitation to seek the Creator through the creation. So when we speak of miracles, such as the healing of the blind, we should not rush to divide science from the supernatural. Instead, we should consider that both may be threads in the same divine tapestry. As we will explore in the coming chapters, many of the Bible's most astonishing miracles may have deeper roots in natural processes we are only beginning to understand. This does not diminish God. On the contrary, it reveals Him more fully. For if God created the natural world, then every scientific discovery is not a threat to faith, it is an unveiling of divine artistry. The universe, in all its order and complexity, is not a cold machine, it is a living testament to the mind of God. If the creation itself is governed by laws written by God's own hand, then isn't it possible that miracles, like the healing of the blind, are simply moments when the divine touches the natural in ways our science hasn't yet caught up with? What if the greatest scientific discoveries still to come are simply God waiting to be found in the places we least expect? From the parting of the Red Sea to Jesus walking on water, the Bible is filled with awe-inspiring miracles that defy human logic. These are not mere allegories or poetic metaphors, they are recorded events that reveal God's power at work in the world. But as we enter an era of scientific enlightenment, a profound question arises: could some of these miracles be understood through the lens of natural laws? And if so, does that make them any less divine? Consider the parting of the Red Sea in the book of Exodus. For centuries, it was viewed as a supernatural act beyond all understanding. Yet in recent years, oceanographers and meteorologists have studied the geography of the region and proposed that a rare phenomenon called a wind setdown, where powerful east winds drive back water from a shallow area, could cause a temporary land bridge. Similar effects have been documented in Lake Erie and even the Nile Delta. Could this be the mechanism God used? If so, it does not strip the event of its divinity, it adds to its awe. The exact timing, the location, the deliverance of an entire nation, all orchestrated with precision. Natural? Perhaps. Miraculous? Undeniably. In Joshua 10, we read of the sun standing still so the Israelites could finish their battle. To the modern reader, this seems scientifically impossible. Yet astrophysicists have theorized that this may refer to an optical illusion caused by a rare atmospheric phenomenon or even poetic language describing extended daylight due to a meteorological anomaly. Again, the point isn't to explain away the miracle, but to marvel at how God may use His own creation, His laws of physics, time, and nature, to fulfill His divine purpose. And what about the healing miracles of Jesus, especially the restoration of sight to the blind? In John 9, Jesus spits on the ground, makes mud, applies it to a blind man's eyes, and tells him to wash in the pool of Siloam. The man returns with his sight restored. To the skeptic, this might sound like folklore. Yet today, ophthalmologists understand that some cases of blindness are caused not by physical damage to the eye, but by neurological or environmental factors, sometimes even temporary infections or obstructions that, when removed or treated, restore vision. Could the mud have had medicinal properties? Could the water have completed a cleansing process? Possibly. But the timing, the command, and the result suggest a divine hand guiding every moment. These scientific explorations are not meant to reduce the mystery of miracles, but to show that God does not always work against the grain of nature, He often works through it. The laws of biology, physics, and chemistry are not barriers to His power, they are the instruments of His will. In Genesis, God declares creation good. He is not at odds with the world He made, He is deeply intertwined with it. Take, for instance, the resurrection of Lazarus. By all accounts, he had been dead for 4 days, a point emphasized to show the finality of death. Yet at Jesus' command, life returned. Science today is still grappling with near-death experiences, cellular reanimation, and the boundaries of clinical death. Could it be that Jesus, the author of life, acted through biological processes we don't yet understand? Or did He, in that moment, override all known laws to reassert His power over death? Either way, the source remains the same, God's sovereign will. We must remember, the absence of a scientific explanation is not proof of falsehood, just as the presence of one is not proof of randomness. The miraculous lies not only in what happens, but in when, why, and through whom it happens. Timing, purpose, and divine authority elevate what may seem ordinary into the realm of the extraordinary. Faith and science are not competing forces, they are complementary perspectives. Faith sees the hand of God in the inexplicable, science seeks to understand how that hand may have moved. And sometimes, those perspectives meet, not in contradiction, but in confirmation. So what if the greatest miracles of Scripture were not suspensions of natural law, but perfect synchronizations of divine will and physical order? What if God's power isn't hidden behind mystery, but revealed through it, waiting for us to discover not just how the miracle happened, but why? From the microscopic precision of a cell to the orchestration of galaxies in deep space, the natural world operates with extraordinary order. Behind this order, many see only equations and probabilities. But what if this structure itself is a revelation of God? What if science doesn't replace God, but instead reveals the very patterns of His divine nature? The universe is not chaotic, it is bound by laws, laws that are consistent, observable, and measurable. Gravity, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, quantum mechanics, each field unveils a layer of reality that works with stunning complexity. And yet, none of these laws explain why such order exists. They describe how the universe behaves, but not who set those behaviors in motion or why they are so finely tuned. Theologians and scientists alike have long marveled at the concept of fine-tuning. Even the smallest deviation in the strength of gravity or the expansion rate of the universe would make life impossible. The odds of these constants aligning to support life are so astronomically small that many scientists admit it's almost as if the universe were designed. For believers, this is not coincidence, this is the fingerprint of a creator. Romans 1 verse 20 declares, "For since the creation of the world God's invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made." In other words, creation is not only a product of divine power, it is a mirror of it. The laws that govern our world are not obstacles to faith, they are testimonies of it. Consider light, one of the most mysterious and essential elements of the physical world. It behaves both as a wave and a particle, defying simple categorization. Scientists can describe what it does, but its dual nature remains elusive. Yet in Scripture, God is often referred to as light. In John 8 verse 12, Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." Could this paradox in nature reflect the divine paradox, God being both infinite and intimate, spirit and presence? Another powerful example lies in DNA, the molecular code that defines every living being. It contains vast amounts of information, coded instructions that build life from a single cell. DNA follows strict laws of replication and mutation, but where did this language of life originate? No natural law can create a language, only intelligence can. For many, the existence of such a precise code points to a divine author writing His will into the structure of creation itself. God's laws are not limited to physics, they are moral, relational, and spiritual. The consistency we observe in nature parallels the consistency of God's character. He is not random, He is ordered. He is not changing, He is constant. And just as a scientist trusts in the reliability of physical laws, the believer trusts in the unchanging nature of God. There's also beauty in the fact that human beings are capable of discovering these laws. Why are we, out of all creation, able to comprehend the universe? This capacity for reason, wonder, and curiosity may itself be a divine imprint, evidence that we were made not just to live in creation, but to understand and care for it. However, understanding how something works does not mean we've captured its essence. Knowing how a rainbow forms through refraction doesn't diminish its beauty. Likewise, knowing the biology of vision doesn't lessen the miracle of a blind man seeing again. The laws may explain the process, but the purpose, the timing, and the outcome still point to God. God, in His wisdom, does not bypass the system he designed. He works through it, upholds it, and occasionally supersedes it for his glory. When Jesus turned water into wine, the transformation was instantaneous, but it mimicked the same chemical process that nature performs over time in vineyards. The miracle accelerated the natural, rather than denying it. In doing so, it revealed that the very system we study with microscopes and telescopes is under the command of a higher authority. So, what if science isn't the enemy of faith, but its unexpected ally? What if every natural law is a window, not a wall, showing us glimpses of a creator who designed the universe not just to function, but to speak? When Jesus healed the blind, it wasn't just a medical event, it was a moment that redefined the boundaries between what is natural and what is divine. Among the many miracles recorded in the New Testament, one stands out in its quiet simplicity and profound mystery, the healing of the man born blind in John 9. This miracle challenges the line between science and faith, urging us to ask: was this an act of divine suspension of natural laws, or could God have been working through the very laws he created? The passage tells us that Jesus spat on the ground, made mud with the saliva, applied it to the man's eyes, and told him to wash in the pool of Siloam. After doing so, the man returned with his sight restored. The method was unusual, even primitive by today's standards, but the outcome was miraculous. Yet intriguingly, the use of mud and water may not be as arbitrary as it seems. From a scientific standpoint, some researchers have speculated that the man's blindness might have been caused by a congenital infection or a genetic condition that affected the development of his optical nerves or corneas. Modern medicine has documented cases where corneal opacity or certain bacterial conditions led to blindness from birth. In extremely rare scenarios, a combination of moisture, cleansing, and anti-inflammatory agents could potentially help restore partial function. But not instantly, and certainly not in someone born blind. So why use mud and water? Ancient Middle Eastern cultures often viewed clay as symbolically and medically significant. Saliva was believed to hold healing properties, and mineral-rich soil could possess antibacterial effects. But the story goes beyond physical treatment. It was Jesus' command and the man's obedience that activated the miracle. The act of applying the mud was not pharmacological, it was spiritual. Jesus' decision to use these materials may have been a divine echo of creation itself. Just as God formed man from the dust of the earth, here the eyes of the blind were recreated with earth and divine breath. The miracle isn't just a healing, it's a sign, a recreation, a reminder that the same hands that shaped humanity can restore what has been lost. From a theological angle, miracles often use the natural world as a canvas for the supernatural. Water becomes wine. Bread multiplies. Storms are calmed. In each case, the physical element is transformed or redirected by divine intention. The laws of chemistry, biology, and physics aren't erased, they're realigned under the Creator's command. It's as if God says, I made these laws, and when I choose, I use them in ways you've yet to understand. This doesn't make the miracle less miraculous. In fact, it makes it more intimate. Rather than acting outside the system, God shows his mastery over it. He is not violating natural law, he is fulfilling it in ways that only he can. That is what separates divine miracles from mere natural anomalies: purpose, timing, and transformative impact. Even if science someday identifies the precise mechanism behind restoring sight in certain types of blindness, it will never account for the timing, the messenger, or the meaning. The man in John 9 didn't just regain vision, he became a witness to the light of the world. His life was transformed not just biologically, but spiritually. The crowd asked how it happened. The Pharisees investigated. But the healed man simply said, "One thing I do know, I was blind, and now I see." That testimony transcends clinical analysis. It's a declaration that what happened to him could not be reduced to mere molecules. So the question remains, when God performs a miracle, is he breaking his own rules, or simply revealing a deeper layer of them that we haven't discovered yet? The New Testament is a canvas painted with miracles, healing the sick, calming storms, multiplying loaves, and even raising the dead. These moments were not random wonders, they were precise, purposeful acts designed to reveal something far greater than physical transformation. As we study these miracles through the lens of science, a surprising harmony begins to emerge, not one that diminishes faith, but one that deepens it. Take, for example, the healing of the woman with the issue of blood, Luke 8 verses 43 to 48. For 12 years, she had suffered from a chronic hemorrhage that no physician could cure. From a medical perspective, her condition could be likened to what we now understand as menorrhagia or uterine fibroids, conditions that, without surgical intervention, would have persisted indefinitely in ancient times. And yet, she was healed instantly by simply touching Jesus' cloak. Theologically, this act was not just about healing, it was about faith. Jesus himself says, "Daughter, your faith has healed you." The implication is striking. While science may attempt to understand how the body heals, it cannot measure the weight of faith, the timing of divine intervention, or the sacred relationship between trust and transformation. Or consider the resurrection of Lazarus in John 11. Science has extensively documented near-death experiences and temporary cessation of bodily function. There are rare cases where people have returned to life after being clinically dead for minutes, sometimes due to cold temperatures preserving brain function. But Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. Decomposition had already begun. From a biological standpoint, such restoration is not merely improbable, it's impossible. Yet Jesus stood before the tomb and called Lazarus by name. Not with medical tools or rituals, but with authority. "Lazarus, come out." The miracle wasn't just in reviving tissue, it was in defeating the finality of death itself. If God is the author of life, why should calling it back be beyond his grasp? What these stories show us is a profound unity between creation and Creator. God doesn't always need to override the natural order to perform a miracle, he often works within it. The laws of biology and physics, designed by God himself, are tools he may choose to employ in extraordinary ways. The same energy that fuels stars and knits DNA is at his command. Faith, then, is not opposed to science. It complements it. Where science maps the how, faith explores the why. A blind man sees, a storm stills, a child walks again, not merely because of altered molecules, but because a divine purpose was fulfilled. Some scientists argue that if something can be explained, it ceases to be miraculous. But the opposite may be true. When we begin to understand the complexity of healing, the precise tuning of the universe, or the incredible mechanisms of the human body, the awe doesn't fade, it multiplies. We see not random chance, but divine design. The harmony between science and faith lies in recognizing that both search for truth, one through observation, the other through revelation. And both, in their purest forms, point beyond themselves to something greater. So, when a miracle occurs, is it a disruption of nature, or is it nature, momentarily illuminated by the Creator's touch, reminding us that the laws we study were first spoken by God himself? For centuries, humanity has pursued knowledge with relentless ambition. From mapping the stars to decoding DNA, the progress of science has been nothing short of extraordinary. And yet, even in our most sophisticated laboratories or deepest theoretical models, a silent truth lingers: the human mind, for all its brilliance, is fundamentally limited. It can describe, but it cannot define the fullness of God. The question arises: can science, in its pursuit of empirical understanding, ever grasp the essence of a miracle, especially one performed by a being who exists outside of time and space? The answer humbles us. Science thrives on measurement, predictability, and repetition. Miracles, by their very nature, defy all three. They are not anomalies to be categorized, they are interventions that speak from a higher realm, one that transcends what human perception can quantify. Consider the blind man healed in John 9. Jesus did not simply restore his sight with touch or word alone, he used mud made from saliva, an action both symbolic and mysterious. Even today, neuroscience and ophthalmology can only partially explain the mechanisms of sight. But how does one scientifically account for a man born blind suddenly perceiving light, form, and depth, instantly? We can analyze optic nerves and brain synapses, but we cannot measure the divine intention behind the miracle. This is where the boundary between science and divinity becomes evident. Human knowledge, while vast, is a drop in the ocean compared to the omniscience of God. The laws of physics may tell us how light moves, but they cannot explain why the first words of creation were, "Let there be light." Chemistry may teach us how bodies are formed, but it cannot breathe life into dust. God operates on a plane beyond causality. While he may use natural laws as instruments, he is not confined by them. His thoughts are not our thoughts. His ways are not our ways. And no microscope, particle collider, or supercomputer will ever decode the totality of divine wisdom. Yet, this limitation is not a defeat, it's an invitation. An invitation to wonder. To faith. To humility. When science reaches its edge, faith begins its ascent. The two are not enemies, they are travelers on the same road, looking at the same horizon from different angles. But only faith is prepared to leap when the road ends. In the healing of the blind, the raising of the dead, and the calming of storms, we find not contradictions to science, but glimpses of a reality that science alone cannot contain. Miracles are not violations of nature, they are revelations of a nature far greater than we understand. The greatest minds in history, from Newton to Einstein, from Kepler to Pasteur, recognized this. They saw no shame in admitting the presence of a higher order. On the contrary, they found joy in it. For them, science was a window, not into certainty, but into mystery. And perhaps that is where we must rest as well. Not in absolute explanations, but in awe. Not in answers, but in wonder. For every discovery we make, we uncover more that we do not know. And every miracle reminds us that the author of life still writes outside the margins of our textbooks. So, if science is the tool of the mind, and miracles are the language of the divine, perhaps it is not science that must catch up to God, but our hearts that must learn to see beyond the observable.